reference. Um, I don't know, have we covered to your satisfaction through kindergarten and that period? I have to say that as I lie in bed some nights and think about my past, Broad Street School was a very important piece of my youth. Um, my best friends at the time were there, and there were older guys and gals there, and the friendships were forged there, and the teachers, interestingly enough, were all single women who made very little money. I often wondered, I remember one of the teachers, only one of the whole bunch, Miss Curtis, a very nice lady, who later became the teaching principal, owned a 1941 Plymouth coupe. You could only get two people in it, three people in it. And I often wondered to myself, how the heck could she buy a car with the money that she makes teaching? And I often went beyond that and said, how can anybody buy a house? But some teachers, I knew two sisters that pooled their resources, and they were able to have things, new dresses, and and way if you take that idea and go way into the 50s and the 60s, if a male teacher in the elementary schools met a female teacher in the elementary schools, and they fell in love, and he courted her, and they wanted to get married, and they were teaching in the same school. Now, I'm talking about even up to 1960s, which is 40, 50, 60 years ago. When they married, they could not both teach in the same building. And that was the way things were done. And that's not in the 30s, that's the 60s, 1960s. A man and a woman, I guess it was the moral code of the time and so forth. But anyway, those teachers, for the most part, were very good teachers. They taught us how to read, they taught us basic arithmetic, and they tried to teach me anyway about the earth. And I still don't know where most of those countries are that they spoke of, and what the products were from coming in and coming out of the ports. It didn't interest me. I was more interested in Dick Tracy and the Lone Ranger and Superman and all that sort of thing. But anyway, the Broad Street School was a very a big part of my life, as it was my brother and my sister before me. And I think a lot of those kids that I knew grew up with me. And I looked through, not too long ago, I looked through the yearbooks from Norwich Free Academy. And I was surprised to learn personally that many of the kids that were in grammar school with me never graduated from high school. And that really surprised me. I expected, sometimes when I go to bed at night and I try to develop some memory, I try to think, let's see now, how many of those were in high school with me? And I run dry, and I realize in the next morning that many of the people in grammar school never went to NFA. Some moved, some died, some went to tech school instead, and so forth. So, but it was interesting to me to think about Broad Street School was a very important part of my life. And when I became ill in 1939, in the summer, I knew that I wasn't going to go to school. I mean, the doctors told me, my parents told me. So the big thing I worried about, instead of my sickness, was how humiliating is that going to be? How difficult is that going to be? Because what happened was that the kids who were 1 year behind me ended up 1 year ahead of me. And that's a big stretch. And I had to learn to swallow that discomfort and a way of thinking that I was superior to them and all of a sudden I'm behind them. And a good friend of mine, Bill Stanley, was even more humiliated when he was at, I believe, Broadway School in the lower grades. He was kept back in, and this is a guy that wrote 8 books later. He had dyslexia, and the teachers didn't know what dyslexia was in those days. This is the 1930s. And I guess it was 3rd grade from what he told me. And the teacher taught 3rd and 4th in the same room. That was common because that was the Depression. There weren't as many kids as there were later, like in the war years. And his 3rd grade classmates were in one part of the room, and the teacher said, all right, now we're going to move all the 3rd graders over to where they'll be in 4th grade. And everybody got up and moved except Bill Stanley, who had been told, well, you're not going to be moving on with your friends. That's a big bite of humility and embarrassment. And I thought that I did it pretty well when I look back now, that it was a surety, it was what it was going to be, and I was surprised that I learned new friends. And today, my wife and I had lunch with 2 people who were those that caught up to me, who originally were 2 years behind me. And now they're among our best friends. So the good things come out of what you think are bad things.